Hi, everybody. I am here with Trista Haggerty from Hawk Circle Retreat Center. And Trista's website is tristahaggerty.com. And Trista has been doing this work for a super long time, almost 30 years. And Trista, I'm going to immediately turn it over to you to introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself and the work that you do. And first, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me for this podcast. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me, Amanda.
Yeah, you're welcome.
My husband and I run a Hawk Circle retreats, and we started 30 years ago, working primarily with children and connecting them with nature and working with their hands and so forth. But as we were doing that, I traveled to sacred sites. 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, actually, I met an elderly German mystic when I was a mother with 2 young children. And my life, as I had been planning it, and was in the middle of creating my life, it just began to fall apart. And I truly experienced for months a dark night of the soul. And coming out of that was when I met my dear friend Helena, the German mystic, and I started traveling with her to sacred sites. And so while we were doing Hawk Circle all these years, I would go to different places, Egypt and Turkey and the UK, and explore and experience the initiations that took place at the stone circles and the initiation caves and the pyramids and the temples and all those different places. And I would bring that awareness and that consciousness back to our place and, in a sense, infuse it in our land. That was kind of what I've been doing all along. And now it's really in a kind of a rebirth process. We've been able to take a little break from during, the pandemic. It was, kind of an enforced break, But it gave us the time to really make the changes that we wanted to make. And so I offer like a pilgrimage experience, something that when I went on these trips, I really wanted to be able to stay right on the sacred land. And I used to always think, gee, I wish there was like a little old woman that lived near the stone circle that I could stay with and learn with, and I think I'm slowly becoming that little old woman.
That higher self, right?
Lives here at Hawk Circle and guides people when they come. So yeah, so that's
so beautiful. Now you have a big piece of property with cabins, and it's a retreat center, correct?
Yeah, we've got some newly updated cabins right on the edge of the forest. We have lots of trails, 200 acres of woods. We raise chickens and ducks and have cats and so forth roaming around. But it's a very much of an immersion experience, to connect really deeply with nature. Forest bathing has kind of become a new phrase, the kind of the up and coming phrase. And that's truly what it is. It's just basking in that energy of the natural world that can be just so incredibly healing and inspiring.
Yes, the messages we get by soaking it all in, right? Incredibly beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Trista, you, with the retreat center, one of the things that intrigues me so much about you is you do training in sacred oil alchemy. And I have to ask you, how did you come to know this? Was it from your trips across the world, or did you have an inner knowing or remembering? Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. I had always made herbal products and salves, for a very long time, mostly to help my family, and so forth, and raising 3 children. And so I always used essential oils in that way, just as it started as fragrance, for the salves. And the more I used them, I kept feeling like there is something more that I need to know about these oils. And so I started studying the oils in a kind of an aromatherapy level. I got a certification in aromatherapy, and I still was not satisfied. I was like, I know there is something more. And that did not come about until my first trip to Egypt back in, I think, 2007. And I didn't realize that so much of the hieroglyphs, what they were depicting, was the making of sacred oils and the use of sacred oils for having, experiencing transcendence or healing or, sacred anointing and different things. But even though I didn't realize that's what was being shown in these hieroglyphs, I came home and it's kind of like an inner library had gotten, opened up. And I just started to really understand what these oils were all about for the Egyptians and how they can be used today. And so with that, I started remembering the group of women that they referred to as the Murafors. And from that has created a training program and so forth, and have brought many, many women through that training. And it's just such rewarding work.
Wonderful. So after you visited the sacred site in Egypt, you saw the hieroglyphs on the wall, and then you came home, but you were kind of starting to feel that energy working through you to help you with this process and how it should work together and the alchemy of it all. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I had definitely, inside me, I could feel like there's something more I need to understand about this, but I couldn't find any books on it. Every book that I would get was either fairly religious and more about anointing, or it was more about aromatherapy in the sense of using it for to help clear your lungs, or use it on a cut, or these different ailments. Yeah. And so it was after my trip to Egypt that the knowledge just started bubbling up for me.
Beautiful. I'm sure other knowledge was too.
Yeah.
So Trista, what would you, for our viewers, what is your favorite, like, one or two oils, and what do they do?
Well, I was using this winter holy basil, and I think that that's a really wonderful oil for our times right now, because the oil helps you to align with your divine self. And of course, to align with our divine self, things that aren't in alignment always come up. And so, for me, working with that oil, it really helped. It helped bring my awareness to certain patterns and certain beliefs that just weren't in alignment with my divine self. And working with the oil, I could feel it almost like a robe, like a shimmering green robe put over me. And that energy was just kind of loosening up these long held patterns. So that's one oil that I've been working with lately. Rose, of course, is a very common oil, beautiful fragrance and very high vibration. The other one that I work with that is not a popular oil at all, and most people would probably say they didn't like the smell of it, is Galbanum. It's very earthy, very rooty, and a very powerful oil that I use when I'm doing soul retrieval work with people. Yeah. It works on the very deep unconscious level.
And it sounds very grounding too, if it's so earthy.
Yeah, grounding in a different way than like the evergreen oils. A lot of people use evergreen oils to help themselves ground. And I think there's also childhood memories, maybe the Christmas trees or being in the woods or whatever that helps. But yeah, Galbanum is, it's more than just grounding. It's a very, very, very deep work with that oil.
That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Always intrigues me, those pieces, because when we have that, sometimes even just smelling the oil can even bring in a memory or a feeling I've always been so attracted to the myrrh and the frankincense, and just smelling it, it almost brings you back to a certain time and place sometimes. It's really beautiful. So Trista, talk about Grail Alchemy. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Grail Alchemy is a course that I just started, and I'm currently bringing several women, a group, through that course right now. And the Grail symbol has always really spoken to me, way beyond a much older version than the Arthurian legends that we're mostly familiar with it. It's one of the oldest symbols. And to me, it really represents the earth, and it represents our bodies and the ability that we have to really like self-empty and open ourselves up to receive in more of who we are. And it's also the people I feel who are called to the Grail are people who are really looking, they're really looking to experience the greatest potential of themselves. And they're on that journey, on that journey for many years, as I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong journey. And so for Grail Alchemy, I guide them through the mystical Kabbalah, or Tree of Life, as it's more known with the Celtic version. I guide them through that ancient symbol as to how it pertains to both your body, your mind, and your soul. We're particularly bringing a lot of awareness to our body, because I feel right now that it's so important for us to fully incarnate. The New Age movement for the past 30 years, not so much now, but years ago, really uprooted us. There was so much focus on positivity and so much focus on just striving for the light. And sometimes it was even more of an external journey. And but I felt at the time, it just really uprooted us and really did not do us any service. So when I do Grail Alchemy, I begin at the base of the tree. So it's like rising rooted, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Sharon Blackie's book. Yeah, right. So it's like that, you're rising from that really grounded place of embodiment. Because we can't be effective in this world and come together and weave a new world, either whether it's for our own lives or the service that we do for others, if we're not grounded in our bodies and rooted in the earth.
Right. So, we can't have the branches and the leaves without the trunk rooted in the earth as we ascend up the tree. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I used to do a long time ago. I remember working with some groups of people, and I used to have them do like intuitive artwork, is what I would call it. And a lot of times I would tell them, draw a tree, a deciduous tree, like an oak tree or a maple tree. And it was always so interesting because you'd have this trunk, and then there'd be all this time spent on the branches. And so I would guide them down into doing the roots, and oftentimes the root base would be so tiny compared to the branches. And it just really spoke of our times, how for generations, for thousands of years, how the focus has been on the solar consciousness, not the dark goddess, not the depths of the earth, not the, the womb where all life begins. That just hasn't been emphasized. And so that's been a really big part of my work over the past 30 years, is to reawaken that, the sacred womb, and not be afraid, not pull away from the darkness, because that's where all life begins,
I'm so glad you're saying this. Yes. Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought the Tree of Life into that too, because it's the Grail for me has always been the body as the temple. And it's not even so much the the physical body, but the light body, all the bodies that we have. And the tree of life, there's there's the dark aspect balancing with the light aspect. And like you said, it has been so positive and light and joy, which is great and wonderful, but it's not encompassing the entire creation. And when the first in the womb of no thing, the first in the antimatter and the darkness, the first spark of light, you have that divine masculine, divine feminine energy both there. And when we don't acknowledge the darkness, we are often not acknowledging those divine energies that are working with us and through us. And a lot of people mistake darkness for evil, but darkness is not evil. Evil is evil. And we've used that word as a society for so long that it's dark. It's, that, and it contradicts the ancient alchemy, and it contradicts the ancient teachings that were very divine and very sacred. So I'm so glad you brought in the dark, because the dark is, there's a lot of dimensions to the darkness as well, and they're not bad. They're helpful. They help us move. They help us alchemize to see what doesn't serve and to see what we need to do in order to shift into being that great integrity.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so necessary. When I see any messages and the wrongful myths, which is another thing that's very much a part of my work, is peeling back the layers of the wrongful myths that were created to serve, somebody else's agenda, not the truth. Right. But when I see that turning away from the darkness, it really just breaks my heart, because it's the mother, and it's the earth, and it's that rich, fertile soil where the seed is resting and gaining so much nourishment during the winter, ready to burst forth. And we've become a society where we don't allow ourselves to surrender to that whole cyclical period of the seasons. We don't allow ourselves to sink into the winter months. We'll fight it, and of course we've got electricity and so forth, so we can keep the light on. But it's just allowing ourselves during that time to rest more, to dream more, and just to be more still is just the nourishment that we need to keep going. Otherwise, we're going to burn out, which so many people are experiencing,
Right. And it's that light, that creative energy that moves, that protrudes, that creates, and then that dark energy that's more receptive, more receiving, more just kind of being. And we often in our society too have gotten into that do, where we aren't having that balance. And the yin yang is one of the most beautiful symbols for that. We have shifted into that more masculine creation, and masculines have divine feminine too, but that masculine creation energy versus the receptive, intuitive energy, which is beautiful and sacred and divine. It's divinely smooth and gentle.
Yeah, it's really where we get our nourishment. It's just like the trees in the fall when they let go of their leaves.
Yeah,
it's they're nourishing themselves so that they can continue to grow. And it's the same for us.
And nature is cyclical, just like the moon. And I think sometimes, I'm not going to say all men, but some men have difficulty understanding women and the way their emotions run and things like that, especially in connection with the moon. And I'm always trying to remind that women are cyclical. We're kind of, our cycles are with the moon, especially very healthy women, their cycles might be right with the moon. And it's a beautiful thing. It's not a bad thing. What happened to women in some of those dark ages where, they would be sent off on the hill to not be near the men for, a week on end. So they didn't have to go through that. But in a way, it was probably sacred for the women to have that experience with the other women too. So.
Yeah, they were probably like, yeah, sure, I'll go up on the hill. I'll
Be
step
with
away
people
from all my
who know what it
responsibilities.
feels like.
Right.
Exactly. I love how you go to sacred sites, and I so wanted to go with you. I think you were going. Are you still going in the spring here, or did you have to cancel that trip? You're still going?
It's it's scheduled for the fall. It was
Okay.
scheduled for 2020 and that got canceled. And then the group stayed with me, fortunately. And then I was thinking about trying it in 2021, but it just didn't feel quite right because I had people from other countries coming, and I just thought that's going to be too difficult to manage, with all the different policies for each country. So, but now I'm quite confident it's going to run this coming fall, and we're very excited about it.
Beautiful. And
Yeah.
where are you going? What's the location?
We're going to be spending most of our time on Iona.
Oh, wow.
It's sometimes called the Isle of Women. It's the Holy Isle. We're going to be spending a number of nights there, and then just spending a lot of time in the inner Hebrides, and then going up into the Highlands, and then back to Edinburgh.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Are you familiar? I think I already know the answer to this when I ask you to delve deeper in this conversation. Are you familiar with the Egyptian connections in that area?
Yes,
and
I
how they
am.
went back into the Druidism and Celtic pieces. Can you talk about that for a few minutes? A lot of people are not aware of that.
Well, Scotland's name came from Queen Scotia, which was from Egypt. Yeah. And so there's lots of different stories, about this, but I would say that one of the ones that you find a lot of commonality with other stories is that there are these very highly advanced spiritual beings thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago that lived alongside primal man, your Neanderthals and so forth. And archaeologists are discovering this now, which is nice, that they're discovering this, and they're finding all these advanced cultures, and it doesn't match what they have traditionally understood historically, that the primitive man did not have these, this different, such advancement. So anyhow.
Or evolution, that wasn't really the way it was, right? Way we thought it was.
Right, exactly. So we've got this highly advanced race and primitive man. And from my understanding, and of course, our understanding of things is always evolving, is that the spiritually advanced race and primitive man came together because there were qualities that were both, primitive man was much more incarnated into earth here, and the spiritual beings, of course, had this advanced understanding of the cosmos and the working with the forces of nature and so forth. And so they came together, and that is considered the holy bloodline. Yeah. Now, so for some people, they believe the holy bloodline began in Scotland. And interestingly enough, too, King Ramses, one of the pharaohs in Egypt, he was known to have red hair. One of the Ramses, and I can't remember which one. He was known to have red hair, and I think that that's very telling that he was carrying that bloodline that may have originated up in Scotland. Maybe as far as the Faroe Islands, I don't know. But and I think that maybe is why, too, that we will see Mary Magdalene depicted with red hair. She was a high priestess in Egypt, but it's been told through legends that she was also up in Scotland, at Iona for a while, where we're going. And I used to think, she's probably depicted as with red hair in certain cultures because, when you think about way back when you had the bards, the storytellers and the troubadours, they would go from country or to region and so forth, telling stories about what was going on. And they would always change the stories so that it was more relatable to those people. And so that's always what I kind of thought about when I'd see Mary Magdalene with, red hair. But then when I really got into more of the Egyptian mysteries, and I thought, no, I think that this is more telling of the bloodline that she came from. I don't know, I don't have anything to back that up on, but
there's so many, and it's hard to always say you can scientifically base things on channeling, but it's beyond that at this point. It's there's lots of evidence out there now for that. And the myths about Mary Magdalene that were she did not get enough credit. She really did not get enough credit. And it's exciting as people are opening up and becoming more open with their minds to really talk about what she was doing and who she was and how amazing she was.
Yeah. Not only did she not get enough credit, she got discredited, in
the opposite,
so many different ways. But boy, is she that her consciousness is flooding, us now, and she's like tapping on so many shoulders of women to wake up. And I always I'm offering a Magdalene retreat this summer because I think her teachings are just so important, and I think she's instrumental in what I call the great reversal. Her message truly is the reverse of what we've been taught.
The inversion.
And it's just a very, very potent, a very potent message. So much of the messaging that we've gotten from religious institutions over the generations is this, turning towards the light and seeking the truth really outside of ourselves, having people in authority in the religious matters and spiritual matters. And her message is like, no, the deeper you go inside yourself is where you will find the truth and where you will find the light. Even when you look at the tree of life, I was telling my students this in the first class, when you look at the tree of life, it's so easy to think of a tree out in the woods and imagine climbing it, and the higher you climb, the higher you get to the sky. But when you're really studying it, it's like the tree is inverted. It's the deeper you go, So I think that's a lot of Mary Magdalene's work, is reversing so much of the messaging that we've gotten.
Well, and it's the inverted consciousness shifting into the Christ consciousness. And the Yeshua teachings, the true Yeshua teachings, were the kingdom is within, and understanding that you shift your reality when you shift and you heal within yourself. And the power of love that we have within us, and what we don't even realize we're capable of because we've kept ourselves down for so long, for so many centuries. It's coming out and it's shifting now, and I'm really excited about that. So the Grail School work and these ancient mystery school teachings and the temple teachings that are coming back alive, and people are so excited about it because people can resonate with truth. They can resonate with truth. And how many times, I was raised Catholic, that you're listening to some of these stories when you're younger and you're like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And you think about the kings that were in charge at the time, that were keeping women down, that were doing these evil atrocities, that were in charge of how this whole thing played out. People are starting to wake up to that now. It's not as black and white as we thought it was. And you're right. We've been taught that divinity is outside of us. It's coming to save us. And it's sometimes authoritarian or judgmental. And that is a subconscious myth and belief that is embedded in the collective consciousness that has caused so much damage. And it's created that warring mentality as well, because we then imprint the need to be judgmental and authoritarian to ourselves, instead of embracing ourselves with love, and embracing ourselves for our entire spiritual journey, instead of the shame and the fear and those pieces that we need to invert back to stand in our sovereignty, which are the greatest
Yeah.
teachings of Yeshua and Mary that got distorted for so long.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think women, especially when they've listened to a lot of religious doctrine, they can feel it in their bones, like there's something isn't quite right. We also were trained, at a young age to respect authority, so it was difficult to find your own truth. But I remember as a little girl sitting in church one time and hearing the minister. I was Protestant, so there wasn't even that much of a female presence, Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene. But I remember the minister mentioning Mary Magdalene and referring to her as the whore, and I was sitting there just doodling on my program, which I always did during church, And then when I heard that, I remember this rage just came up.
Me too.
And I didn't open my mouth, and I'm glad I didn't, because I wouldn't have understood it myself. But it just kind of goes to show you that even as a little girl, we know when we hear something that's not true, like Mary Magdalene as a whore,
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
And, there were practices that she, as a priestess, understood to assist with the ascension process of even Yeshua, that, there's a lot of pieces there that people don't know and understand about her. And I love how our voice as divine feminine women who are really committed to this path and, connected to the Grail, and probably for thousands of years we've done this, right, Trista, that are teaching this and spreading the knowledge and the truth of the beautiful divinity of women, that is not for us to go take it to the other end of the spectrum and say that we're better than men, for us to finally stand together as equals and to merge and to be as one, because we all have those feminine and masculine aspects, and to finally step into that and rid ourselves of the shame, the shame, even the shame that we were responsible for original sin, and not we, the feminine. So there's so many of those myths. And I love that you said that your work is stripping the myths, and me too. The subconscious drivers, because of these myths, are profound, very profound. And it's time to shift out of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love everything you just said. One of the first questions I often ask my students is, what if it was Mary Magdalene that was the savior? And I just say that, and I just say, just feel, what does that do inside of you? How does that feel?
As a woman, Yes.
Yeah. And for all we know, maybe she was. John the Baptist said, "Oh, here comes the savior," when he was at the well. It wasn't just Yeshua, it was Mary Magdalene that came at the same time. They were walking together. So it's it's an interesting, you sit with that, and you realize what kind of an influence the whole story has had on you as a woman,
Right. And you sit with the feeling of them, the masculine and the feminine. And why would it just be masculine? Right? Why would God divide itself that way and not have the beauty of the feminine and the masculine together? Back to that yin yang symbol. Here we go. The sun and the moon. Why would we separate ourselves that way? And that's what we did for thousands of years. And we felt that separation within us and the wars within us. And I often teach about divine feminine and divine masculine, and I'm not sure everybody understands why I take it so seriously, but that's why, because it's that inner division of the polarity that we have been entrenched in for thousands of years. And a lot of because their story was so distorted.
Yeah. And that's alchemy, right?
Right.
That's the alchemy is when you bring
to become one.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. And as within, so without, and as above, so below. Yeah.
Right.
I knew this would be an amazing conversation. Trista, two more things. do you want to share an experience at a sacred site that shifted you and changed you and was just profoundly awe-inspiring?
Oh gosh.
I know it's a big question.
Yeah. I would have to say it was my first stone circle encounter years ago. I was in northern England at a stone circle called Longmeg. And it was when I really learned about embracing the shadow at a time when the New Age was really rising in popularity. You know, this was back in 1989 or 90 or something like that. But yeah, I'm so thankful for this experience. I was at a stone circle with a small group and my friend Helena, and we were in a circle holding hands, and we were singing a song, and we were kind of dancing around, and everybody had their eyes closed. And every time I closed my eyes, I would see this horrific looking face of this woman. And I was just like, you know, right, here's the New Age thinking of how come I'm not experiencing something beautiful, you know, because here I am at this amazing site, you know. And so I would open my eyes and kind of shake it off, close my eyes, go, you know, get back into the rhythm of what we were doing. And I would see the face again. And this probably went on 3 or 4 times. And each time I turned away from the face, it grew more and more gruesome. Yeah. And my higher self, or my deeper self, as I like to call it, I felt this presence right behind me, moving through my arms to embrace the horrificness of what I was seeing. And as I did that, it melted into such beauty. Just this, the alchemy, healing again, embracing that shadow. And that was a real turning point for me. Not that I had ever really resonated with the New Age movement. And this was just a couple years into my training with Helena, but it was just so significant and so profound. And I carry that experience with me anytime I'm experiencing something that I am inclined to turn away from.
Yes, and face it instead. And I love what you said, because in that moment, you transmuted that, you healed that, you shifted that, sometimes subconsciously in ways we don't understand. And we often, as a society, either medicate it, right? Or we don't look at it, and we keep doing our jobs and are raising our kids and doing these things, and we don't ever look at it. And then later in life, it comes back again because we never dealt with it. And that's that alchemy that you talk about, and the transmuting that shadow aspect by embracing it and loving it, for the scared child that it is, so that we can live more whole lives.
Yeah, so many people will say, you know, that it scares them because they're scared to do the shadow work, you know, because they don't know what they'll discover, like a deep, dark secret, you know?
Right.
But I always tell them that there is no deep, dark secret, because the shadow side is working through your life every day.
Right.
The struggles that you have, the unmet dreams, the challenges, all of those things, you know, the shadow really well because it is orchestrating so much in your life that you don't really want, you know?
Yes.
And usually when I describe it in that way, they're like, oh yeah, you know, so it's not something to be feared. I think it can be such exciting work, because it's like opening up a treasure chest, you know, and maybe that treasure box looks kind of daunting, you know, and scary looking or whatever, but you open it up and you just find these gems of more of who you are. And it just gives you so much more freedom and power to be able to create your life, you know, the way that you want it, you know, to have what you're dreaming about and what you're living actually match, you know?
Yeah. And what's covering all that up that you can't get to that because of the fear and the shame
Yeah.
and the guilt and the regret and the not feeling worthy of it, or feeling like you're going to be shamed by others for it. I love that analogy because it's like you're taking the gem out and it's covered in grime and dirt and you're just polishing it off, and you're skillfully shifting it to be this beautiful diamond. And that's what you become. And then there's more, and then you do it again. And it's fun to do it with other people and with other women and conscious men as well. And having that experience and the tears that come and the connection that comes, because we all go through those same things that we've been so afraid to share openly and be vulnerable about. So I love that analogy. Wonderful. Yeah. All right, Trista, I could literally talk to you for 10 hours and I wouldn't know it went by. Why don't you, before we go, share your information one more time so people can find you if they're interested in your programming or even any of your sacred site visits as well coming up.
Yeah, okay. So I have my website, tristahaggerty.com.
And that's Haggerty, right? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I also have all my sacred journeys listed on sacredmountaintours.com. And then our retreat center is hawkcircle.com. So all different ways to find me.
Wonderful. We will definitely have another conversation, and I have to get out there and visit because it just sounds so beautifully amazing. And I can only imagine the energy of walking onto your property and what that feels like and how beautiful it is. Just like yours.
Yeah.
So
happy to visit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Trista. And we'll see everybody soon. Thanks a lot for watching.
Thanks for having me.